Awesome. Yeah. So today our goal really is to just be talking about how to build a resilient talent pipeline, what that looks like over time, both for the different kinds of talent you might be looking to recruit, and also thinking about the life cycle of your company. And so how things might develop over time as your company itself changes. And this probably goes without saying, but I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. I know that there's a lot of knowledge in the room, and things are more fun when they're discussions and not lectures. And so feel free to raise your hand, interrupt, participate as much as you're able to. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, yep. Okay, great. And so before we get into the meat of what we're talking about today, I would love for everyone to kind of take a moment to think about the best team you've been on ever. You can think back to a high school sports team, maybe a particularly effective roommate group that you had. Maybe that one time you built a shelf with a sibling and it worked out really well. I would love to have people post in the chat what the group was and what you accomplished together, what you worked on. And just take a moment to think through that. And it doesn't have to be the best ever, but just one that you know that you really enjoyed being on. Okay, seeing some company love. So working with James, that's great. It can kind of be anything. Don't feel shy. Awesome. So with Andrew, it's a startup where it sounds like there was a small team, just 5. Everyone was kind of just working together on the common purpose and vision. From Emma, I'm seeing awesome, working on an ISP. Yeah, and you were just answering emails and it was excellent. That's really, really great. Thank you for that example. Seeing some others, cross-functional teams and say like having outcomes. So you save the company a lot of dollars, and that's a really great example. Another small Scrum team in South Africa, and you laughed while you got things done. And so it sounds like that team just felt good. I'm seeing another one, a small startup that created freelancing friends. Yeah, it sounds like there was probably some connection on that team. I'm seeing a trend here in what people liked around the small, close-knit teams. Awesome, really close to the team and relaxed from Sarah. Stressful, but you're getting a lot done. Yeah, the early days of a startup. There's drama, but you are working together as a team. These are all really, really good examples. And as we kind of pause and think about what made the teams that you are on so special, does anyone want to kind of voice over and share like what touched them about the teams that they just reflected on? Maybe if one person wants to come off and share.
I could do that. I really like the fact that we could be open with each other. We could have disagreements that were, amicable. We could, have really healthy conflict about ideas, and none of us ever took it personally because we all knew that we were trying to reach the same goal. And we wanted the best idea to win, not the loudest person.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for that example, Andrew. We can go to the next slide, James. And so the reason I wanted to start with thinking about teams was generally when you're hiring, the talent you're looking for wants to be on a good team. This feels intuitive, but I think is really important to just state as true. And generally, good teams have 2 things in common. You are forming meaningful connections and relationships. I saw, again, so many comments about teams being small. It's because you are connected to those people and there are growth opportunities. And that can come from the form of growth in your career, but also growth from the perspective of kind of the goal that everyone is marching towards. And the thing I have to propose for you all today is that there's this sense of present goodness. So the people I'm connected to feel really good, and future goodness are kind of, both of these things are held in the relationships and the connections you have with your teammates alongside how you imagine the future unfolding as you're spending time on the team. Especially in our current culture, people want to grow and advance and feel like they're making progress, especially with the work that they do. And they also really importantly want to feel like they like where they are and who they're doing things with. And so the team has to be a good team. And as we're working through our presentation today, we'll talk through just the fact that these meaningful connections and growth opportunities are things you can give your candidates before they even start on the job, to kind of signal to them the kind of place that they're going to be in. So we can go to the next slide. Before we go in, I feel like it's probably important to just understand who's in the room. And so I'll give an intro to Edlyft. Just for my context, it would be helpful if y'all could just share in the chat what your role is. And so if you're an engineering manager, maybe you can say EM. If you're a founder, entrepreneur, you can give it an F. But curious to kind of understand who I'm talking to today. Ooh, back. Okay, you're on the multitudes team. Awesome. A lot of engineering managers. Awesome. CTO. Great. Okay, so everyone here is technical, which is awesome to see. Managers. Okay, great. Congratulations on the promotion to the newly minted engineering manager. All right. And so my name is Arnelle, as James mentioned, and I'm Edlyft CTO. And we as an organization help companies nurture and train their future workforce. And so from the pre-hire perspective, this looks like upskilling on technical interviews and other things to kind of build your brand for the candidates you're hoping to hire. Post-hire, but before the candidates actually start, it's about managing those communications with that talent to make sure that they stay engaged. And then also giving them tools to have a personalized onboarding experience. So it's not just, they're going to be a front-end developer on your team, but your specific stack is X, Y, Z. Let's make sure that they're at least a little bit familiar with it before they start so they can really hit the ground running when things get going. Awesome. Okay, so we can go to next slide. One of the things that's generally really important here as well is being really clear on our why. And so we know generally where we're headed, right? And so connectedness and growth opportunities, sharing those with candidates day one. But in order to accomplish this, we want to make sure that we're clear on why we even want to have a strong pipeline. Like, what will it do for your team? And the why it matters will enable a what. And so on the right-hand side, you'll see some examples. Maybe you want to have a really deep bench because you're hiring now and you know that you will be hiring over the next 5 years. And so you're going to constantly want new candidates in the door. I believe you all had a conversation with Vitor about building flexible eng teams, part of that being, for example, having a deep bench. And so I won't really go into that, but that is an example. You might want to be cultivating relationships in a particular geography. And so again, a lot of you all are based in New Zealand. Maybe you're moving to Australia and you want to start opening business there or having teams there. And so what does it look like for you to be building out a strong pipeline in that geography? Another piece is you might have a particular hiring timeline, or the talent you're looking at might have a particular timeline. And so you need to be flexible there. For folks hiring candidates in the United States, in the university system, it's a very peculiar timeline where often candidates are getting roles 6 to 9 months before their jobs start. And so what does it look like to have a recruiting process that supports that? And so again, when you think about building a strong timeline, what is the thing that you're actually trying to accomplish with that? And being clear on that will help you have the right strategy. Okay, and so we can go to our next slide here. And there's a framework or schema that I want to set up that I think will be helpful for us in having this conversation. On the right-hand side about the timeline that students will go through, or not students, candidates broadly. We work with a lot of junior talent, so I might slip and say that as we go. And so it's important to understand this timeline because, again, there are different strategies to use based off each area has different strategies to pull. And so you might have different memories associated, for example, pre-hire versus post-hire before you start. And maybe if you all, so maybe not the CTOs because you probably started your companies, but maybe if you were hired in as CTO, you can answer this question. Curious to just see an A or B, where do you have the most memories related to when you got your first job? So was it pre-hire when you were kind of just engaging, courting the other company? So if that's true for you, go ahead and type an A in the chat. Or was it after you got your offer, but before you started in that kind of engagement period when they were trying to, get you really excited to start on the job? Where do most of you have memories associated? For me, it's be not this job, but the job I was in beforehand. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of A's. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Awesome. The results in the chat are not surprising to me. I think a lot of folks pay attention to A, which is very important. And we'll talk through some of the things you can do to actually leverage B in a way that's going to set your talent up for success and support you as you look to onboard more folks. All right, so we can go to the next slide. Awesome. And so as evidenced by what we're seeing in the chat, generally you have the most leverage in terms of driving talent you care about into your profit process versus being passive at the beginning of the pipeline before you've made any offers. And so that is the pre-hire stage is just very, very important. And again, as we think about what we're wanting to do with candidates, we want to help them connect. So we want those meaningful connections, and we want to cast a vision for them about what the future will look like once they join you at your company. And when we think about those two things, right? So how do we bring both in? I'll go through each of the items below. And so the first on learning opportunities is so important. We've already talked about this a little bit, but generally people want to grow, especially when you're talking to engineers, especially engineers that are earlier in their career. And it's important for them to feel like they're going to come and learn and actually contribute meaningfully into the work that's happening at the company. And so when you're thinking about junior talent, hosting events, when you're doing something where you're doing an interesting technical deep dive on a specific topic, often we've seen work incredibly well for companies. Similarly, hosting hackathons or maker sessions of some sort where people, again, can kind of get that taste for the growth that's going to be the growth and the learning that's going to be for them once they come on. All of these things show that your company is a dynamic place for people to learn and be challenged and to grow. I've seen companies do interesting blogs that showcase the new products that they're developing. And again, the goal, there are a lot of different ways to do this, but the goal is to make it clear to your candidates that they can learn and grow, and you're giving candidates a taste of the learning that can happen for them before you've actually even hired them. Another really important thing is leveraging internal experts. People generally, as fundamental humans, want to be seen and known. How can you tap into this and also their desire to grow in your hiring process? There's so much power in being known by who you consider to be an expert at a company. And so if you're looking for a job and you feel like the smartest engineer at that company or one of the most inspiring leaders knows who you are as a candidate, that's going to make you really excited to go work at that company. And it's very normal for people generally to find people that they admire and like, and you want to be close to those people and proximate to them. And so for the ways in which you're able to leverage your broader team to make connections with candidates, especially candidates that you're really excited about, that will have really huge impact. And the special thing about working with experts also is that they can showcase your product and the things that you're doing, and then really start casting that vision again for the growth that's going to be happening. And this works best, of course, when these connections feel genuine and real. And so really it's just about humans connecting with each other, with, the stuff in the middle being about the awesome work that's happening at your company. And the last thing I'll share here is around expanding your team's capacity. And so there are lots of organizations whose bread and butter is to connect candidates to companies. Often we're under a lot of pressure in our companies to execute. So you've got a long product roadmap. The product managers and others on the team are excited to get through things. And so you can partner with organizations to augment your team's capacity, to connect you to talent, and also to connect you with great moments to connect to talent, so that you're not having to, create the event yourself. I think this is particularly important if you have specific diversity goals, and you're wanting to not just recruit at one or two schools. It's hard for you, especially if you're on a small team, to go to a myriad of different places. And so when you're able to connect with an organization that can kind of multiply your reach and impact, it can be a pretty good use of time from an ROI perspective. And on this, I think it's important to give a note on early talent. I spend a lot of time with engineering teams and recruiters that want to connect to junior talent. And here are some things that I've just noticed help from a tactical perspective. So it's intuitive for a lot of companies to want to go into some community or school and give a here's my company and why you should care about it talk. Well-intentioned, but generally no one actually cares. Students don't want to just learn about the company, because if they just wanted to do that, they would read your website. And so instead of just doing kind of a stale session about your company, maybe showcase some of the things that are strategically important to your team, something that you yourself are excited about that your company's building, because students want to learn. And you can use this time to, again, educate, connect, build out this sense of relationships and future growth. Yeah, students are hungry to learn. Use events as a mechanism for teaching. And again, relationships here also really matter for all kinds of folks, but generally early talent matters a lot too. James mentioned our first job at Bain. It was one of the first things I did. And I turned down a salary that was 1.5x. I turned down a job that had a base salary that was 1.5x my Bain offer, because of the connections to the people that I'd made while at Bain. Before I even started, there was just this sense that the people I'd be working with would be so great and I'd learn so much. So that to me felt like an investment. And so it's really great to just think about what's unique about your company, from the product to the people. Like, what are you fundamentally excited about? And these are the kinds of things that you want to share with candidates, and you can do it in combination. So I have, of course, my own examples, but I'm really curious to just hear from you all. If anyone wants to come off of mute and share why they took maybe one of their first jobs and what convinced them to apply to the company in the first place. So thinking about this before the candidate has accepted space, what has encouraged you to say yes?
I guess for me, what encouraged me the most was the domain itself. So specifically, like what the work looks like, and also for that matter, who the potential mentors could be. So when you start meeting other people in higher positions as well, and if they come across as the kind of person that you want to learn from, then that's all the more motivation that you want to join that company.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, it's you see what you're going to do, what you're going to be learning, and you're able to imagine yourself kind of being proximate to these internal experts who can show you the way as you grow. That's a great example. Does anyone else want to share an example from their experiences applying to jobs?
People are popping in the chat. So Andrew really liked it was autonomy, and then Jason talked about meeting genuine people with their excitement for the work. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, those are all great examples. And yes, often when we first start our jobs, we're very green, and so there's a lot to learn. And so I'm sure we've all developed and learned since then. Thank you all for sharing those examples. They're great. Okay, we can go on to our next slide, James, here. Okay, and so one of the things that I think is particularly exciting right now is this post-hire, post-offer, pre-start period of time. Generally is one that we don't spend a lot of time and energy on, from thinking about how we can be setting up our candidates for success here. And so again, just so that I know who's in the room and the kinds of companies you all are at, I'd love, you can just put a number in the chat for the number of months someone has before they start on average at your companies. And so if it's, you're hiring someone and they're starting the next day, feel free to put a 0. If it's 1 or 2, go ahead and do that. But curious about the range that we're working with. Okay. Perfect. Okay, super, super helpful context. Okay, great. And so when we think about this, a very unique period of time, generally when someone is signing up to do a new job, relationships are critical. There's so much excitement when you receive an offer, and there's all of this momentum, and we want to make sure that the momentum keeps going. Less so now, but generally, if someone is a top engineer and or just top talent generally, they'll have multiple options. So it's important to start on the right note as we think about making sure that that talent is actually retained and set up for success in the initiatives that they're going to be driving. And so one thing to think about here is communication with that talent. And so who within your team is in charge of communicating with that talent? Are they on email campaigns? Do you add them to the weekly product update list so that they can just be aware of, you know, the movement that's happening? And again, the call here is, how do you make sure that you're keeping the momentum that started once you gave them that offer and there was all of that excitement? Next piece here on leveraging relationships. And so we've spoken about this a little bit, but having a connection to someone who's within the company before you start is really, really meaningful for creating a sense of belonging and starting to build a mental conception of the impact you'll be able to have as an employee of that company. And so it is not light to start helping candidates build relationships with people. And again, if it's only a month or two out, it's not a huge burden for the person you're connecting them to have like a coffee style chat with them maybe once. And that person can give them a download on the kinds of things, what it's like to work at the company, what the culture is, because every company's culture is just a little bit different. And they can also, that candidate will then have the opportunity to start preparing in a way that feels very human. Yeah, and again, when we think about growth opportunities, we want to think about how we can set candidates up for success, giving candidates a clear understanding of the tech stack, their team's processes, overall culture. And so tools like Edlyft, so the one that our company is developing, are all about managing that information sharing, which can sometimes be hard to coordinate when you're a larger org or if you're trying to move really quickly. It's hard to make sure that the manager of the person is, you know, emailing them a month beforehand with all of the information that they need. But that like one quick communication can actually save the end manager themselves a ton of time once that talent actually starts, because they're, you know, not having to answer kind of the repeat mundane questions. And so there are a lot of tools like this out there to support you on the communication standpoint, and then of course on the leveraging your employees to build excitement and relationships. So happy to share more about tools like Edlyft and others as I know, kind of explain again like how companies can really leverage this time so that candidates are retained once they start and you're really getting the ROI that you're spending on recruiting them in the first place. Awesome. Okay, and so we can go to the next slide. And really here, there are so many things you can do. This is really the whole people operations org. So what are companies doing to make sure that talent is learning while they're there? There's internal mobility, and, you know, people are performing well. So of course there are tools like Multitudes and many others to really highlight what you can be doing post-start to make sure that your talent is resilient. Or we can go to next slide. Okay, so this is what I have prepared for you all. It was really nice to be able to share this with you. And I'm open now for questions if anything kind of came up as I was chatting that you all have questions about. So I'll pass it over to James now.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that, Arnelle. The one takeaway that I thought was really unique and interesting that has not ever happened to me is in that post-hire but pre-start stage, getting the product update, the emails from the company. I thought that was that's a really creative way of bringing someone on board in a very like light touch way. Like you're not giving them work, you know, because I also had a different company. I got like a pre-assignment and I was like, oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Paid for this pre-assignment. But the product is really cool, really interesting. I want to kick off the Q&A with some questions that were submitted online. So I know, Anna, you had asked, what is and this is a little bit from with the post-start stage, but Arnelle, I wonder if you can speak to this. How would you think about getting more talent out of a small team? I think especially up front, almost everyone talked about small teams being, you know, places that they remember the most when they had the best time on the team. What's the best way of leveraging that?
Yeah, a really, really great question. And so especially if you know that, you know, you're a small team and you're about to bring someone on board who's new to the team, I think critical to use use a tool like Edlyft, get your engineering manager to spend, or whoever's going to be managing that talent, to spend 30 minutes writing them an email, just preparing them for what's about to happen. Because our research finds that managers will spend up to 10, 20 hours with talent that's new because they're just not acclimated to the way the team works. And maybe there's tech debt that they're not familiar with, et cetera. And so the more time you can cut out there so that candidates just have time to be building your product or just working towards the unified goal, the better. And again, when there is a small team, thinking about the connectedness and the growth opportunities, you want to make sure that every person on the team is feeling both of those. And so what kinds of things can you be setting up so that there is really high connection on the team? And what can you be setting up to make sure that everyone's working on something that's mission critical and feeling like they're contributing to this broader growth for the company? One thing that Edlyft does that I'm really proud of is we'll have stand-ups Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for 15 minutes. And the 15 minutes before stand-up, everyone sends in their stand-up update asynchronously. And so when we get on the call, first half, and then in that 15-minute period before the call, we're answering each other's blockers, that kind of thing. So that when we get to the call, the first half of it, so the first 7-8 minutes are an icebreaker, and we rotate who asks the icebreaker question. And the last half is just giving a like 1 or 2 liner on what you did yesterday, what you're up to today, and if anything didn't get resolved in Slack, setting up an action item to connect with whoever you need to connect with. Again, these like in-person moments are really critical. So how can you make sure that you're using them for the combination of connectedness and growth, I'd say.
Great. I'd love to ask another question that also came from a previous Tech Leader chat, which is, again, on the internal side, how do you make the case for hiring students or hiring people that are more early in their careers, more junior engineers? Because a lot of times, if you're a startup, you're like, oh, we need more senior people. We need people that we don't have to manage so much, they can deliver immediately. But then as you grow, those delivery pressures don't necessarily fade. As you start, meeting the bigger expectations of VCs, or if you IPO and you meet public expectations, how do you make that case internally?
Yeah, again, a really great question. A lot of the people we talk to are in this bind where they want to hire cheap talent because the economy is hard and you want to hire cheap talent, but junior talent takes so long to ramp, and it's sometimes frustrating to work with them. We hear lots of really interesting stories, like, talking to this junior talent and maybe they don't know how to write a good Slack message. And so they're very verbose. They're asking you a question, you can tell that they're stuck, but you're not able to kind of penetrate and break through to be able to help them quickly. They just take a lot of time. And so that often is the mindset that people are in. And it just feels easier to go with someone who's done it before because you have faith that they'll be able to execute. And so totally get the question. There are a couple ways to think about building a case here. One of the first things, again, is doing some work on your team to make sure that the talent that you're hiring in the recruitment process, so before they start, so either the candidates that you're screening or the preparation you're giving these candidates before they start will allow them to ramp a little bit more quickly. Often with junior talent, part of the reason why starting a first job or an early job is difficult is you don't even have the right buckets in your brain for the information that you're going to be grasping. I think a really obvious one is something like Git. If you've never used it before or haven't touched it very much, this idea of thinking about version control is just confusing, similar to deploy processes. And so the more you can kind of seed those concepts with talent ahead of time, you as a team will have the opportunity to spend less of your team time thinking through that. So that is a very strong recommendation. And the other is just to be future thinking. Look, you hire someone who is senior, they'll probably be able to get a PR up in the first day, which I'm sure everyone on your team is excited about. But if you're hiring the right talent and really priming them for success from day one, they're often, what we find is their learning trajectory is much faster and much steeper. And so you'll end up potentially even getting more from them over the course of the time they're at the company than that person. And so there sometimes is a smaller upfront investment. Tools like Edlyft can help reduce the amount of investment you're having to do from a time perspective. But often, again, if you're interviewing for the right skills, that junior talent will learn really quickly and will soon be able to be contributing just as much, if not more, as that, staff level engineer.
Awesome. Thank you. Questions in the chat from Jason. How do you balance keeping in touch with someone in that pre-start period by keeping them engaged and motivated, but also wanting them to have a break before the job starts?
I love that question. And Jason, the fact that you're asking it is a sign that you care about the people you're bringing on board. And so that's great. How we manage that at Edlyft with our product is it's optional. So it's opt-in. And then the minimum amount that to use the product will take about 2 to 3 hours, and each module on the product is snackable. And so you can consume it and learn within 20 minutes. And so you're not having to, sit and do like a 4-hour course, but instead are able to do little bits when you have the energy to learn. And so, yeah, I think one thing is you don't want to tell someone you must now read all of the documentation for Kafka before you start, because that'll put pressure on them. And so I think using external tools can kind of support with this, but if you want to go directly to the candidate, I would just let them know, hey, this is probably the stack. These are some resources that are frequently shared internally on the team when people have questions. You don't have to, but if you'd like, here, you feel free to take a look at them. Generally, people will want that because it's stressful to start a new job, and you want to put the right foot for it. And so generally that is a service. And I would just recommend that you keep the suggestions that you give to 2 to 3 hours, and don't send them a 40-hour course, because that, I think, is what's going to prevent them from feeling like they can fully disengage in between their jobs.
Great. And then a final question here from Kaio in the chat, which is, how can establishing a clear career ladder, especially in engineering, contribute to the attraction and retention of diverse talent?
That's a really, really great question. And so I'll kind of take a different tact for answering this question. Career ladders are important. People want to know how they're going to succeed and hire. And so having that clearly laid out is important from a transparency perspective. But I think more than just the career ladder, I think it's making it clear how to learn and what it's great to know, there's E4, E5, E6, E7, but being really tactical about at this company, you know that you're ready to get promoted to the next level when you can do X, Y, and Z things really clearly. And so it's being super specific about the skills that are required. And if you're managing someone, hearkening back to those skills regularly to point out, hey, you need to learn, you're doing really great, exceeding expectations on these things, but maybe these other skills need some improvement, so that you can give that person opportunities to grow along those dimensions. And so career ladders are great. It's great to have them. Even more important is making sure that the skills line up to the work that they're doing every single day, and that you can create clarity around that so that they know where to be putting their effort and energy.
Amazing. Thank you so much again. This was really great. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording before we break out into our breakout rooms. Give me
one thing I'll just say is anyone who wants to kind of chat about this a little bit more, has questions or thoughts on how what it might look like to be able to hire talent in a sustainable way. If you're curious about our tooling and want to understand how it might support you in your hiring process, feel free to email me.
Okay, and with that, stop recording.